I think that's the first time that I have played an actual tune on this as my introduction. Hello, everybody. It took me a minute or two to get this started because for some reason it wouldn't work in the other browser. So I apologize for my tardiness. I've got a little bit of news. And, normally I used to put this news in the past. I would put this kind of news on my website. Um, but what happened was we started having a switch from uh, children as students to adults as students, which I don't have any problem with at all. But at this point, and I'm trying to remember, I think right now I've got only two children that are students, and both of them have won competitions this week. So, as far as school kids, I'm batting 1,000 as a teacher this week, right? Uh, the one student, Riley, I don't put last names for students. That's how I've always done it. I don't mind saying their first name, but Riley auditioned for the local orchestra, um, like youth competition. So whoever wins gets to play a solo with the orchestra. Now, Riley is a multi instrumentalist. Riley plays a bunch of different instruments. So he auditioned on two instruments. He auditioned on trumpet and he auditioned on uh, not vibraphone, marimba. And he actually won. They said he was the youngest person to ever win that competition since they've been having it. So he's a seventh grader, and he won the competition. He did not win it on trumpet, but he did a great job. I I um, worked with him on The Quiet City. Believe it or not, here's a seventh grader playing The Quiet City. He's actually playing it again tomorrow for solo contest. Um, a seventh grader playing A Quiet City, and he's doing a great job with it. And yes, so I'm very happy about that. And then also my student Will got selected for district band. So now both of these are out of the state. I won't tell you where they are. That's not necessary. But yes, this is the kind of stuff I used to put on the front page of my website, and it would just go chicken, 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 right? I would keep adding. Almost every week we had like my students were winning awards, but that's what happens when you have 30 school students. When you have 30 school students, um, it's easy to chalk up a lot of awards that they have while they're taking lessons with you. So yeah, that page, the first page on my website, would just keep scrolling all through the year. And we had to take that down because it doesn't look so good if it's just like a few here and there. Um, then it makes you look like that you're not doing anything. And it's different with the adults, right? The adults, they have accomplishments too. It just ends up not being the kind of accomplishments that are so formal. That's the best word for it. Their accomplishments aren't as formal, so they'll say, "I want to be able to play this piece," or I want to get through this song without any endurance issues," um, and that's not as newsworthy in terms of how people digest their trumpet news. So it's still just as important. Those adults, their goals, when they accomplish those goals, are just equally as important as these youngsters who uh, win contests like that. It's just as important and just as worthy of celebration. It just doesn't make good website fodder, you know? Anyway, so I'm going to answer Sean's question. Sean says, I know you say we need to listen to what we want to learn to play. Do you have any recommendations for who we should listen to besides yourself that you think are great improvisers? Okay, so here's the thing, this besides yourself thing, I don't actually think you should be listening to me in that regard. If you like the way I play, then you can spend time listening to my stuff for pleasure. If you are doing it to educate yourself as a hello Karen, if you're doing it to educate yourself as a trumpet player, in this case a jazz improvising trumpet player, that's not where you go. That's I'm not talking about me. I've been actually quite uh, out outwardly verbal about not listening to my stuff for your education. This, okay, so that said, let me answer your question of who we should listen to. Um, Clifford Brown, and by the way, it doesn't have to be trumpet players. Uh, if you're not listening to Charlie Parker, then you're missing something. Clifford Brown, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis. Uh, I'll put Sonny Stitt. I think a lot of people don't put Sonny Stitt that high up on the list, but I do. Okay. Um, Sonny Stitt, Sonny Rollins. There's a song. There's an album where the two of them play together. I think it's Sonny Stitt, Sonny Rollins, and Dizzy Gillespie on the one album, and they do. That's my favorite recording of that tune. I can't. I'm so bad remembering names of tunes. On the sunny side of the street. So they do that tune. Hello, Gabriel. Sean says, I like listening to your free improv. Well, I appreciate that. But you understand what I'm saying, right? That's not going to help you with your jazz improv. Okay. So yeah, if you want to go historically, so you should be listening to, let's go to the trumpet players historically that you should listen to. Starting at the top with Louis Armstrong. And if you can get Ori, I think they call him Kid Ori. Like I said, I'm terrible with names. Kid Ori, if you can find recordings, I don't know if those are even available. Um, but everyone starts with Louis Armstrong. Then after that, historically, you should be listening to Drop Me Off Uptown. What's the name of the guy? Boy, I'm drawing a blank on names today. He used to play. Let me do a quick search here. He used to play. Oh no, I'm forgetting the drummer name. Roy Eldridge. There it is. Roy Eldridge, Gene Krupa, and Roy Eldridge. Okay, so Louis Armstrong, Roy Eldridge, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis. Historically, those are always the first four because that's like the trumpet genealogy, trumpet improv genealogy. Louis Armstrong, and then down the tree is Roy Eldridge, down the tree is Dizzy Gillespie, down the tree is Miles Davis. Okay, that's a great place to start. After that, things start to split a lot, right? There's Like I said, I already said Clifford Brown. On the more modern side, you can listen to people like Freddie Hubbard, um, you know, aside from Freddie Hubbard, who am I saying? Woody Shaw, right? So I'll jump back to Karen. Sean says, "What do you think of Roy Hargrove?" I think Roy Hargrove can be on that list. I I I caution people to be careful with the more modern players because the whole point of listening to that stuff is that you want to have that foundation. And with the more modern players, even Winton with his more recent stuff, I'm not saying don't listen to it. Of course, you want to listen to it. You've heard me say in some other videos, be part of this economy, the trumpet economy. You have heard me say that if you watch those videos. You have to be part of this economy, and buying albums that you like is a part of that economy. And I say buying albums today, everything's streamed, right? So listening to the albums that you like from the artist that you like, that's part of being part of that economy. But if you're doing this to study, then the greater value is going to be in those first four that I said: Louis Armstrong, Roy Eldridge, um, Dizzy Gillespie, and Miles Davis. Those are the four biggies that you want to hit. And on the sax side, and there's a bunch of other sax players besides who I named, right? But for sure, Charlie Parker, for sure, Charlie Parker, um, for sure, Sonny Stitt, Sonny Rollins, um, then Prez, I forget Dexter Gordon, I think is Prez, right? So anyway, let me hop back up here. Sean says, I'm having difficulty memorizing a few tonalization patterns. I'm playing slowly, but any other suggestions? No. That's all you do is you play slow. If you have to break it into chunks, you break it into chunks. But you just keep going, keep doing it. Now, Karen says, our section leader encouraged me to listen to someone I liked and finds my sound I like a lot, but don't have a particular person. Any suggestions? Um, my biggest suggestion. So, what I would do if I was trying to do what he says, I would go through that page on my website where I have all the big classical guys listed. Let me pull up my. I'll put a link. It's hard to get to because a lot of people don't know how to use some of these features I put up here. I'll have to have like a video someday that I show people how to do this. But for now, I'll just. So here's the page. And what I would do is listen to 4 or 5 of each of these and then figure out which one you like most and do what he's saying with that person. Okay, so there's the link to the page. It has a list of the top classical trumpet players in the world. There's a few that I put in there that probably don't belong in there. Like there's a girl in Hungary that she's not really a classical player. That's the only reason I'm saying, and she's not as good as the rest of these. But I included her at the time because it made sense. Melissa Veneman also probably shouldn't actually be on the list, but I included her because she's somebody I think we can keep an eye on. I think she's going somewhere. Um, but yes, the rest of these names are huge, right? Some of them I didn't know until I put the list up, and then I asked trumpet players to tell me if I'm missing somebody, and then they would send names like this one. Um, David Red. I can't even say his last name. He's about halfway down. Anyway, but yes, I didn't even know who that was until I posted this, and then other people said, "What about this guy?" So yes, that's what I would recommend. Go through the whole list, listen to 2, 3, 4, 5 of each of them, and that's how you find out what you like, isn't it? If let's say you go to a buffet and they say, "Well, you can just eat what you want," but you've never had anything that's on the buffet before. You got to go through and have little bits of each of them. That's um, I'm revealing one of my weaknesses here. So I go to the buffet and I'll always get one plate first with just smidgens of each of the things, and whatever I like, that's what I'll go back for and get more of that. So, and I think the music can work that same way. All right. Gabriel says, I have a strange question. I went to a workshop to collect the trumpet after ultrasound cleaning, and there was a man who is a good jazz player known in the city who collected his trumpet. The, the boy gave me my trumpet and asked if I wanted to try it. I did a few scales, and the jazz man came up to me and said contemptuously, "You sound like someone who plays classical music." Well, I would say thank you very much. Huh? Does anyone who plays jazz play scales differently from those who play classical? Yes, sir. That's um there are stylistic differences, and for someone that doesn't cross the divide, they play their scales that way. I have a philosophy that if you want to play both styles, or more specifically, if you want to play more than one style, then your exercises should be without style. But if you only want to play classical music, then there's no reason why your scales should not be classical. And if you only want to play jazz, there's no reason why your scales should not sound jazzy. So yes, I, I can tell when I hear somebody warming up, they might not be playing anything that has any style to it. I mean, in terms, they might not be playing a song, but just by the way they're playing their uh, scales or their articulation studies or whatever they're using for their warm up, long tones even, I can tell if they are classical players or jazz players. And I'm going to be honest with you, as I get older and as the classical scene changes, I fit less and less in the classical world. That's not on me as much as it is on the scene changing so much. How the classical players play today is different than how it was 30, 40 years ago. Um, so, yeah. So, like, I don't know if I should be saying this out loud because some people would get upset, but it's the truth. Um, I'll answer that in a question in a second. It's the truth. I'm gonna go ahead and say this. Um, Bud Herseth. Now, okay, before I go into this, we have the trumpet community is full of hero worship, and people are blinded by their hero worship. They're blinded so much that they can't hear what's actually happening. So if a hero sounds bad in their ears, they can't tell, or they excuse it or something, right? Anyway, so we had Bud Herseth, who used to be until he retired, he was regarded as the best orchestral trumpet player in the United States. we had him come down to Houston, gave a master class, and he's working with these. This is after he retired. He's working with these students at Rice. And based on today's standards, the way he played in that master class, I don't think he'd get a job, an orchestra job. I don't think he would have won an orchestra audition based on how he was playing, not because it wasn't good enough, but because the scene has changed so much. And it's hard for trumpet players to accept that kind of talk because, oh, you can't say anything negative about these heroes. And in fact, I'm not actually saying anything negative about him. What I'm saying negative is about um, the society that we have now, the trumpet society, the orchestral world society. Um, but here's the thing: in that master class, this is what I took away from that master class. The students that played in the master class had this angelic sound. It was a gorgeous angelic sound. But what he pointed out in the master class was all true. It was compared when you listen to him play the piece and then you listen to them play the piece. What they played was expressionless. There was speaking comparatively. He put his heart and soul into the music. It actually sounded like something. Whereas the students didn't have any of that. And I have theories about why. I have a lot of theories about why. But the truth is, he would not have won an audition playing the way he did in that master class. But he was, in my opinion, 100,000 times, I'm exaggerating, 1,000 times better than they were, that's the part where hopefully everyone could agree with me on. But the way I describe it, what I took away from it walking out of there, and this is, you can't really blame the students because the society has changed. If they want to make a living, they can't play like that. They have to be more homogenous with what's going on. You know, many years ago, all of the orchestras sounded different, and someone who had a unique character could find a place to play. That's not true today. Not as true as it was. Anyway, so Gabriel says, how would a C scale and how would you play a C scale in a jazzy way? Okay, it has to do with articulation, and it has to do with the pitch, right? So a jazz player doesn't mind if the pitch moves in, right? If I'm playing from C to D, there's almost a portamento between the notes. Okay? Even the way I'm articulating that first note. It's like a wah, wah, wah. We can do that in jazz because it's part of our expression. Mr. Talau says hello from Copenhagen. Hello, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. I hope that makes sense. In jazz, now I actually have a video somewhere that talks about the differences, but I don't think it was called The Difference Between Jazz and Classical. So I wouldn't know what video to send you to where I demonstrate those. In classical music, everything is uniform. We want if we have 5 notes in a row that are tongued, we want 5 uniform articulations. We want the articulation on that note to be just like the articulation on that note to be just like the articulation on that note. And we spend our entire careers working to shrink that tolerance. Let's call it a tolerance, right? That's one way to explain this, right? In jazz, the tolerance is like this. In classical, the tolerance is like this. There is no tolerance for a different sound on one note and a different sound on another note. There's no tolerance for uh, a smooth. If you have a crescendo, there's no tolerance for anything but the most smooth crescendo you can possibly have. And so when we hear that kind of training, and because that's a level of willpower. Let's not call it a level because that sounds belligerent. That's a type of willpower. It's so the jazz players don't exercise that kind of willpower. They have on the other side these other things that they put effort into. They don't put in effort into this uniformity over here. So when you hear someone that plays with that kind of elevated uniformity, it 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 shines of classical training. You almost can't miss it, right? It sounds like classical playing. The jazz guys don't have that uniformity because it's not as desirable. Now, in that video I was telling you about, that I don't know which one it is, I actually point out that it's possible to play jazz with that kind of uniformity of sound, uniformity of attack, and stuff like that. It is possible to play that. Um, I've heard some great trumpet players play that way in their jazz improvisation. It doesn't, in my opinion, sound very jazzy, but they are playing jazz. They're playing improvising with a rhythm section and stuff like that. And they're phenomenal players. It's a little cold, if you ask me. That kind of playing is a little cold. And depending on the player, maybe a lot of cold, right? Maybe a lot of cold. All right. I hope I answered those questions all right to your satisfaction. Any other questions? I'm trying to, in my head, pronounce this name. Tralao. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm probably way off. He says, can I learn to play the trumpet without being able to read sheet music? Yes, sir, you can do it that way. It's a little more difficult, and I'm going to tell you why. So, if you learn to read music, step by step can be laid out for you. Okay? Without reading music, what makes it a little bit more difficult, but also maybe a little bit more rewarding. Okay? So it's never just one thing is bad, one thing is good. There's always different sides to all this stuff, right? So if you are learning to play by ear, it really becomes a trial and error. So you try something, and if it doesn't work, you try something else. And you keep doing that until you get the results you want. And there's a it can be very rewarding. And in fact, sometimes, you know, I got comments on an old video where I was talking about the difference between self-learned and people who have had lessons. And I was thinking about this because it was a negative comment, which didn't make sense to me. I was trying to figure out, why would someone leave a negative comment? I'm basically saying that both sides are okay. Um, and I think in the last couple days, I think I figured it out. There's a source of pride that people have when they say, "Oh, I figured this out myself." And I think sometimes when you say, "Oh, you know what? Both sides are okay," they take offense to that because now that their source of pride has been um, kind of negated just a little bit. And so, yes, I actually think there is, and the only reason I bring that up is because, yes, there is a source of pride that you can get from having figured it out on your own. I think it's probably kind of addictive, actually, to really. Now, what I say in that video is that we're all self-taught. There's no such thing. I even heard a podcast just yesterday where the guy says, and he had some famous teachers, right? And he says, really, we're all self-taught. And I agree with him 100%. Uh, we're all self-taught. And we just have to, when we do the reading, it helps us learn from other people's mistakes. I think that's the best way to put that. When we read, we have certain advantages when we read. Um, that that when you don't read, you don't have access to those advantages. Hello, Greg. Nice to see you. Greg says, I have a pretty bad overbite. I'm an advanced player of 28 years, but in terms of upper register, my embouchure is falling apart a bit when practicing and playing for a long time. Any tips on overbites and embouchure? Sometimes I slot right on up the scales, and at other times just feel the fatigue on my chops. So any excuses for the embouchure strength also? Um, so I have a very bad overbite too. If I put my teeth together, I can fit that much of my um, finger in there. Now, I don't know how. Let me just say it this way. I don't teach this to my students, and I was thinking about this the other day. Why I don't teach this to my students? I was told in high school to, since I have an overbite, to whenever I play the horn, is jet my jaw forward. And that's how I play. If you ever see any photos of me playing, even when I'm doing lip buzz, I'm not going here, right? I can't even lip buzz that way. I put the jaw forward. I can tell you it. Oh, you do that? Okay, so then you're doing what I'm doing. Okay. Um, Yes, I pushed the until they're even, which I can't make it perfectly even because I've got like a mess of teeth there, like this. How do you make that even? But I guess what I'm putting even is my lips. No, no. Do you know what? I don't know who. I don't even remember who told me to do that. Um, I don't know who told me to do that, but I remember it was a teacher. It was either Sam Trimble or Kenneth Capshaw. One of those two told me to push my jaw forward, and it was painful. I think it hurt for 6 months. I don't know where I'd be right now, and the thing is because I've been doing it for so long, I forget that I'm doing that. I forget. So if I have a student with a overbite, so my question for you, Greg, is: are you familiar with my one range approach. Um, because that's always my answer to anything that has to do with the chops. If you were my student, the first thing I would find out is if you were resting properly. You know, if I have a student with any issues with the chops, first thing I'm going to find out, are you resting properly? Second thing I'm going to find out is, are you truly pushing through on the days you should be pushing through? We want an exaggeration of both of those. And that can be difficult to accomplish. Let's say if you're a professional player and you're playing 6, 7 nights a week, that can be hard to do. That can be really hard to pull off, the exaggeration, because if you have a day that you're supposed to be, um, you know, limiting your effort, and then you have like if you have a day that on your limited day you have a big gig, then that's hard to pull off. And he says I overdo it, and yes, I push through much to my detriment on days. So there is a such thing as pushing too hard on. So let's make this clear. The There's 2 days of pushing max in the whole week. Okay, never more than 2 days, and one of those days is supposed to be a little bit more conservative than the other. One of those days should have, and I might not have made that so clear in the book. Okay, one of those days should be a little bit more conservative. If you have set for yourself to, on that more conservative day, if you have set for yourself to quit at 2 hours, you quit at 2 hours. You don't go past that. Um, on the other day, you push yourself, almost like the words that you say here, to my detriment, almost to your detriment. But that I have to draw a distinction between those two pushing days. There should only be one day per week that you go to your detriment. There should only be one day like that ever per week. And if you don't have one of those days per week, that's okay too. You can, I remember when I was doing this, I had obligations. I had a family to feed, so to speak. And when I was going through some of these chop building periods, I could not uh, do the system as well as I wanted. So I would just scale everything just back a little bit, right? I'm not pushing to that point, because you don't want to push that far unless you have a day to go back to where you're not pushing. And I think I say the words in the book, you have to have wisdom. I think I say that. You have to have wisdom, because if you just pound yourself to death and not ever have that follow up day where you're playing more limited range, more limited time, then the benefits of pushing that far are erased. And all you're doing at that point is damage. So when you go to your detriment, when you go that far on a single day, the days that follow should not be like that. Okay? All right. So Gabriel says, I have a question. When I study on the book Band Scale Expansion Studies, shall I start with any warm-up like mouthpiece buzzing and some long tone, or can I just start on the book as written? You can just start right on the book. You don't have to do any of that. Now, if that's all you're going to do for the day, because I've had days like that. Like not necessarily the expansion studies, but I've done like just tonalization studies for that day, and I know that's all I'm going to get for the day. So I will start with a little bit of lip buzz, a little bit of mouthpiece, and then I'll do my maybe a little bit of long tones, but you don't have to worry about that with the expansion studies because that's got kind of long tones built into it, right? Greg says, thank you, you're welcome. And he says, that is fantastic advice. Well, good, I like hearing that. Okay. I'm going to try to say these names. You know, I had a concert not long ago, and I told the guy, I said, no, I'll go ahead and have a speaking mic so I can introduce the people. I didn't realize I'm okay with romance languages, and I'm okay with other ones, right? But if it's like Eastern European stuff, I have a lot of trouble. Or anyway, what my point is, I can't pronounce names very well. From Anyway, let me just say tips on Flutter Tongue. Um, since we're talking about that. Okay, so here I am struggling. I'm going to give you a bit of backstory. Here I am struggling with Flutter Tongue. Not Flutter Tongue. R's, right? In Spanish, we have R's. That's the rolling of the R's. They call it a R. Okay, and I couldn't do it. And I read these articles that say some people can't, and it's just that's the way it is, right? And I'm thinking, oh no, I'm one of those guys. And the same thing with the flutter tongue. I could not get a consistent flutter tongue. It would go, right? I couldn't get a consistent flutter tongue. And so I'm practicing Spanish, and it's with one of those courses, right? And I thought, okay, instead of trying to sound like some German dude trying to speak Spanish, let me actually imitate the sound I'm hearing coming through the computer. And to imitate that sound, I actually raised my tongue up inside my mouth. And there's the R. I was trying to pronounce R with a big Teutonic R. You can't do that. You can't do a R with a open oral cavity. And it's the same problem with the flutter tonguing. You cannot flutter tongue with an open oral cavity. If you're thinking everything has to be open, oh, it's not going to work. So when I do flutter tongue now, I close the oral cavity so that the tongue has something to bounce back off. I'm actually playing on those notes. It's not a lot. I'm not saying, like, if this is the mouth and this is the tongue and this is where I normally have it, I'm not saying I'm going up to here, but I'm definitely going up at least this high. That way, when I put my tongue here, it's in a position leverage-wise to actually get the tongue to do it. So I can now pronounce, believe it or not, all those words that have R's in them because now I'm putting my tongue up in the mouth so that can physically happen. I think you're the first one to ask about that since I figured this out. I mean, like even in lessons, because it really doesn't come up very often. So that's my recommendation, is to make the oral cavity smaller by bringing the tongue up in the mouth. If you try to play it with a big sound, it's not going to happen. And by the way, who wants a big fat sound with a flutter tongue anyway? Right? It's not really our idea of what. Well, Gabriel asks, what is that sound used for? There are actually pieces written in the classical. Oh, so it's Indian. I wish I could ask you guys how you pronounce your names. So he says, love from India. Now, so now that I know that you're from India, I'm going to try to Yuvaraj. Is that Yuvaraj? Now I'm putting the accent on the last syllable. Yuvaraj. Okay. All right. So, oh, great. I got it right. Okay, wonderful. So, Gabriel, there are actually classical pieces that have that in it. There's even one of the Charlier. Let me get the Charlier book real quick. I have my Charlier book in a protective plastic bag. I actually have two of them, but this one I bought used, and it has all of the translations. It's got the translations in it. I bought it used like that. So in the Charlier, and I think it's towards the beginning. I don't remember which etude it was. I apologize for that. I am not one of those guys that yes, I don't remember which one it was. I'll find it in a second. Watch me be wrong, and that would just demonstrate just how right I am about how I don't have these things memorized. Because I'm getting pretty deep into the book now. There it is. Oh, it's one of my favorites. I have this memorized, actually. here I'm telling you I don't have this stuff memorized, but I actually do have this one memorized. Number 16. It's got flutter tongue at the end. And it's written as a tremolo. That's how we notate it in trumpet. We put tremolo marks. See the 3 bars across the half note? That's a tremolo marking. That's how we mark flutter tongue. They actually put the words tremolo here, but that's flutter tongue. Okay. Yes, I have that one memorized. Anyway, yes, one of my favorite etudes of all time. So no, it's not a trill. Greg says, Gabriel says my dog's jumped. Greg says New Orleans jazz sound growl is similar. Yes, it sounds similar, and I'm going to tell you, I can't do the New Orleans growl. The New Orleans one, if you do it properly, and I'm not an expert on this, I'm just telling you what my understanding. The New Orleans one is from the throat, and it sounds a little bit different. You can tell when I'm doing it that it's not right, but it gets me through the gig. I can't do the one from the throat because I have coughing fits. And I've tried. I still have coughing fits. So when they go, they're like growling from down here. Yeah, something like that. He says the uvula floaters. So it is very similar sounding. Obviously, the flutter tongue doesn't sound nearly as human as the New Orleans growl. I used to play in a band with Barry Lee Hall, and he had that growl thing. It was just, oh man, it would just make you cry when he played like that. It would just make you cry. Any other? I hope I haven't missed any. You know what I was thinking last week? I should be telling you guys, if I miss one of your questions on accident, please feel free to bring it up again. I don't ever miss people's I don't ever intentionally miss people's questions. It's just sometimes it gets lost in the scroll. So always feel free to ask again. And that's the same thing is true with like emails and stuff like that. If I somehow missed your email, I'm not blowing you off. I don't do that. You can send the email again, and you know, Greg says Freddie Hubbard did it a lot. Yeah. Yep. All right. Any other questions? We've got a little bit of time left. Yeah, that was the first time I've been asked about Flutter Tongue since I figured out what I was doing wrong. Now, I don't ever do Flutter Tongue for jazz unless I have my plunger. Let me give you guys a demonstration of that. This is the bag I carry to every gig. Oops, wrong pocket. And notice my plunger is at the top. And no, I don't have the right plunger. I know that people, because of the trumpet history, this people don't use this size plunger, but that's what I've always used. So. That's about as much flutter tonguing as I ever do on the jazz stuff. Never anything more than that. Karen says I learn about all sorts of things here. Gabriel says, do I practice tonalization only slurring, never staccato? You know, I can think of some situations where you might want to do staccato for something that's coming up. Let's say you're working on a piece and your staccato is terrible. Then you can, just for this short term, change it to help you work on your staccato. You can do that. But if you do that all the time, you're missing part of the structure of the daily routine. Now, if you're not doing it in the context of the daily routine, right? If it's not in the context of the daily routine, you can do it any way you want to do it. Okay? The reason we slur is because of the routine. If it's not in the routine, don't worry about that. Okay? That's contextual, right? All right. So, Craig says, oh, yeah. Karen says, how do you whinny like a horse? That's half valve. Okay? And I'm going to show you how I teach it. I do half valve here, quarter valve here, and just barely putting the valve down here. I don't put it all half. And I don't even know where I got that from. It's more like this, right? And I actually physically shake the horn. I'm not trying to do that. So what's happening on my lips is I'm just taking a high pitch and smearing it down, and then I'm shaking it. Okay? That's how I do it. I don't know if there are other ways to do it. Yuvaraj says, I play trumpet classical music at an intermediate level, and I didn't understand jazz much. Suggest me a way to learn jazz and any book or tutor you suggest. I would recommend first to listen. And we were just talking about that earlier, about who to listen to. And I'm going to say again, the top four: Louis Armstrong, Roy Eldridge, I'm remembering his name now, Dizzy Gillespie, and Miles Davis. We want to start there. Start with the listening. And as far as playing, at first you can get by just trying to imitate some of the stuff they're doing. If you need books, then there are books where you can buy um, transcriptions. They're called transcriptions, and you can buy Louis Armstrong I say you can. I actually haven't seen Louis Armstrong transcription. I'm just assuming it's out there. Um, there are Dizzy Gillespie transcriptions. There are um, Miles Davis transcriptions. There are, who did I miss? Roy Eldridge. I don't know if there's a Roy Eldridge transcription book. If there isn't, I should write one. Huh? Hello, Raimo. Raimo says, greetings from Finland. Nice to see you again. Mr. Charlal says, does playing with a mute inhibit proper technique? It can, if you do it too much. And I think the reason for that is because you can't hear all the subtleties coming out of the horn. So if you're doing it all the time, it can lead to some problems. I've told people many times on this Q and A, if it's for practicing, I would much rather play softer than without the mute than to play with the mute in when I'm practicing. I'm convinced that I can play trumpet softer than most people play their TV in the hotel room, right? So I don't try to play loud when I'm practicing in a hotel. Gabriel says, can you play that sound comes out because you eat crocodile? Okay. You can play that sound comes out because you eat crocodile. I do eat crocodile. All right. Greg says, I know you lean more toward classical, but what do you think about the harmony and the sound it makes? A heck of a lot of air. So actually, you know what? What's funny about this? Let me talk about that a little bit. I don't actually lean classical professionally. Almost all my gigs are jazz and commercial gigs. In the last 7 days, I had 5 gigs. All of them were jazz gigs. If the last 8, last Wednesday, I had a commercial, like a wedding band gig. I get very few classical gigs. So even though and let me explain that too. So you could say, well, then why do you have all this classical stuff on your YouTube channel and very little jazz stuff on your YouTube channel? And it's because I hate playing jazz with tracks. I hate it. I don't even call that jazz. So I could put tracks on. I know, and I'm not putting anyone down who does that. I have friends who do that, and they've got literally hundreds of recordings of themselves playing jazz with tracks. But to me, jazz is so human that I don't like that. I don't want to do that. I did it a few times. But I don't like it. One time I did. If you look up Eddie Lewis Giant Steps, someone challenged me to record a video playing Giant Steps. I didn't have access to a band, so I made a, a band in the box, right, live. Okay. So yes, I put my rendition of Giant Steps up, me playing with band in the box track. I took the piano out, and so that's a good. I mean, if you're not a jazz player, you can't play Giant Steps like that. I think In fact, you know what? It used to be on Google. If you typed Houston trumpet player, then it used to be that video came up of me playing giant steps. It was almost embarrassing because I was playing with a track. Huh? Okay, it doesn't come up now. But yes, um, it was I was playing with a track, and if you typed Houston trumpet player, that was what came up. Yeah, and you know what? If you do it in YouTube right now, if you put Houston trumpet player, my recording of giant steps comes up, and it's funny because I think a lot of people probably think I lean towards classical, like you said. Um, anyway, I know I'm not answering the question. Let me get on to the question, right? Um, the harmonium is great for right. That's right. Most saxophonists can't play giant steps. That's true. So so no, I don't have a recording of that live. I don't have a recording of Giant Steps live. And in fact, I say Giant Steps. I didn't actually play the head. I have my own head um that I wrote over Giant Steps chords. Oh, that's the wrong key. Anyway, um, so that's the head that I play. That it's called "Living This Way" is actually the name of it. So, and I have another track that I did with a more soul sound. That was for a client that wanted to know if I played the right style for his wedding or whatever. And so I put that up. I don't even remember the name of that song. I had never heard of it. I bought an MP3 backing track and recorded with it. I can play that style too. Um, I can tell you this though. I love classical music just as much as I love jazz. And when I put the classical music stuff on my YouTube channel, it's got all my heart and soul in it, even the stuff that's written for beginners. I made a decision all the way from the beginning that I was going to treat jazz and classical equally. I give them both effort, both the equal effort. And because of that, there's problems that other people have when they're trying to do both that I've never had because I've treated them equally since I was a sophomore in high school. Part of that is because all of the rudiments I treat without any expression whatsoever. They are just deadpan. You play the rudiments like a machine. Then when you play the music, that's when you put all the expression in it, and that's where the jazz or classical stuff comes out. All right, we have enough time for one more question, and then I gotta go. Any other questions? This was a good one. They're always good ones. I enjoy hanging out with you guys this way. Um, thank you for hanging out. Thank you for your questions. It's really fun for me because it makes me think. All of your questions. Uh, he says, Greg says, I love your mouthpiece. What is it? This is a Shelky F1. And if you look at it compared to other mouthpieces, now I'm trying to get a Warburton to replace it. I bought a, let me show you. I bought a Warburton cup that has the same depth. You can see my finger goes all the way in there just like it goes all the way in here. Okay. But look at the length of the shank. Because of the depth, and I checked it when I got it, because of the depth of the cup, it's too flat. It's a whole quarter tone flat on this trumpet. If I were to put my tuner on right now, there's my tuner. Oh, wow. It wasn't flat. What's going on here? I checked it when I got it and it was flat. That's just bizarre. That's just bizarre. Yeah, it's got some pitch issues. I think it's because of the length of the. So I sell Warburton. I have the kit over here. And I'm gonna ask them if they have a shorter shank for the trumpet. This is a trumpet shank. That's not a cornet mouthpiece. That's a trumpet shank, but it's just shorter. So anyway, all right, that's it. I gotta get going. Thank you guys for hanging out. God bless you all. And we will see you next time. It will probably be next week because I don't have any gigs next week. Okay. Well, we'll see you next time. Have a great week.